Welcome to MILF.
I'm Courtney.
And I'm Jennifer.
And we are two moms into literary freedom. Hey, Jennifer, I am super excited to introduce you and our podcast listeners to Dr. Holly Richmond. I think Jennifer and Holly have met before at a birthday party once or twice, but we are just super excited that you have agreed to be on our show and talk to us about all the things relating to sex, the good, the bad, the ugly, and more. So welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you, Courtney and Jennifer. I'm so excited to be here, and I know we have a lot to cover today. So thank you for having me on.
Sure. Can you tell us real quick? Because I'm like, I'll have to admit, anytime like the topic of sex comes up in conversation, whether I'm talking to like parents or friends or whatever, I'm like, I have a friend and she's a sex therapist. I brag about you, but I don't even know if I like explain it the right way. So for, everyone that I've told about my sex therapist friend, can you tell us like what it is that you do?
Yes. So at the base of that, Courtney and Jennifer, so I'm a therapist, so just a trained therapist. And then from there, I added on a PhD in somatic psychology, which is body psychology. And from there, I added on the sex therapy certification. So for me, like the body, sexuality, and then kind of my focus, especially in my early years, was trauma. So body, sex, trauma, those all go together for me. And I kind of can't see anything outside of those. And I don't know why you would study sex and not study the body anyway. So that's how
makes perfect sense.
Yeah, but the day-to-day, I work mostly on Zoom and see individuals and couples. And sometimes I do retreats. Sometimes I'll fly to the city and do intensive with my couples. So yeah, it's just mostly therapy, some education, some book writing.
Awesome. Oh, that's right. You did write a book. Could you tell us about your book real quick?
I can. Let me grab it. So this is my book. This came out in 2021. It's called Reclaiming Pleasure, a sex positive guide for moving past sexual trauma and living a passionate life. So again, when I started my career in sex therapy, it was very much in the trauma world. So I worked at a rape crisis center for many years and wrote my dissertation from the research there, but really have tried to put a sex positive spin on it because I feel like for the most part, we knew how to treat trauma, right? But no one was looking at how do we treat what comes next, which is helping people have healthy relationships and great sex. So that's the part that I love to talk about.
Oh my gosh. That sounds amazing. And I mean, that's just such an important thing to talk about. But of course, it's like the last thing that everybody talks about. And that's kind of what we want to talk about more today is kind of destigmatizing sex education. So let's just start with addressing the elephant in the room. It's hard to stomach the fact that even after being found liable for sexual abuse, including non-consensual digital penetration, the majority of Americans still voted for Trump's return to power. In addition to this sending a message that sexual abusers can achieve arguably the most powerful position in the world with no accountability, his second victory has and will continue to jeopardize these essential services that we briefly talked about to survivors, including rape crisis hotlines, hospital advocacy during, forensic exams after the assault, and even prevention programs. To add insult to injury, Trump has repeatedly elected and elevated individuals accused of committing allegedly and enabling abuse, harassment, and domestic violence, most notably Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, and so many more that we just do not have the time to get into. And to me, this screams that sexual violence is about power. So what are your thoughts in terms of what we're seeing right now in today's administration with MAGA and, the power of sexual violence?
Yeah. Courtney, when you say it all that succinctly, it sounds awful. But I think at one point there were 46 counts of sexual assault and some nature sexual harassment. It just tells me, so remember 2017 and the Me Too movement, things swung pretty hard to the left and people started paying attention. I think that became intolerable, right? Because what we always say is for most men, we hear about all these men out there sexually harassing, sexually assaulting people. But then when it comes back to every man, they're like, but not me, but
Right.
not me. So we're left with this void of like, who's doing the abusing? Because it's never the guys we know. It's always pointing the finger at someone else. I think the finger pointing just got too close to home. So that right-wing patriarchal system really kicked into full gear, and here we are.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
So actually, that reminds me of a study. Jennifer, you may have seen this floating around on social media. It was a study that I saw it on Instagram. Because what am I? I always forget. Am I Gen X? Are we?
No, you're a millennial one.
I'm a millennial.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm a young millennial. No, I'm an old millennial. But either way, us millennials, and I think, whatever comes after, we only use Instagram.
Right.
But so I follow a few accounts on Instagram, one of which is called Feminist Hood and at That's Still Rape. And they brought light to a university study by S.R. Edwards and V.B. Hins that men will admit to rape as long as you don't use the word rape. And that kind of makes me like question, like, how many men in my life do I know that, actually did force a woman into having sex because they called it something else? Because 31% of male students in this study said that they would force a woman to have sex if nobody would ever know and there wouldn't be any consequences. But here's the interesting part of the study. When researchers asked the same question using the word rape instead of forced sex, the number dropped to 13%.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like what does that mean? What can we do, like, as a mother of a boy? As we all have boys, we all have sons, and like we don't want our sons to be part of this problem, obviously.
I scare mine within an inch of their life. That is my tactic. I don't know.
I love that.
Right, if it's right or wrong, but we talk about consent all of the time, even in just, so I have two boys of, don't touch your brother like that, or you can't, even when they were little, I don't know if your boys did this, but they loved boobs from the get-go and would just walk up to me, even at 6, 7 and just grab my boobs and be like, oh, we need to start talking about bodily autonomy and consent. And these are mine. They're not yours anymore. So,
not anymore. They used to be.
Right.
Not anymore. But Courtney, I think that speaks to the larger problem of sexual trauma in general, which is we still want to make it about violent rape or violent non-consent, right? The media shows us that rape is when a stranger hides in the bushes or is hiding in the backseat of the car and violently attacks a woman most of the time. Obviously, this can happen to men as well. That is not most sexual trauma. So 88% of sexual trauma is perpetrated by someone known to the survivor. So that's that situation that you were talking about, right? Because it's not violent. Most sexual trauma is not violent, it's violating.
Okay.
The US cannot wrap their head around that because there has to be a bad guy. And again, back to most men, they can't be that bad guy. And I'm going to try to advocate for the really lovely men in our lives too, that can absolutely make mistakes. There's never any excuse to have non-consensual sex. And there's the other part of the equation where women have no idea how to use their voice.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Education is double-sided. Like, I also have daughters. So it's just as important for me to teach my son, like, hey, no means no. And like you said, at earliest of an age as possible, but it's just as important to teach my daughters, hey, you need to speak up and use your voice in all situations, and say, hey, even if it's like your girlfriend who's like touching your hair, like, oh, you don't like to be touched, you don't want to give your friend a hug every time they see you, then say, hey, I'm not a hugger, but I still want to be friends. That's really hard to do, I think, as a tween or even a teen, is to use your voice when you're afraid of like hurting someone's feelings, which I think really that's a whole nother conversation, is like
getting rejected because of speaking up.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, Jennifer, you're right, especially for preteen girls, being part of the pack is like the number one priority. And subconsciously or consciously, I want to be included. I need to be included here, any kind of rejection. So if it's easier for just me to keep my mouth shut and let Julie play with my hair, why don't I just take that easy route out? But I promise that leads to not using your voice when you're 18 and at college and maybe thinking about having sex for the first time, but are not ready, but then you don't have that no.
Yeah.
You don't have the like that practice or like the courage to say it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I could see how that's really hard for young girls to learn to do that because, we're quickly, when we speak up, we're quickly labeled as angry, aggressive, bitches. Um, so yeah, it's hard.
We're gonna take that bitch word back though, right? We've already started taking it back, right? And like I kind of like I curse like a sailor in this house. And recently my husband tried but failed to establish this rule where like anytime mom curses, we give $1 to the kids. That didn't happen because mom
You ran out of money quickly.
but I was like, hey, bitch is we're taking it back, badass bitch, boss bitch, like we're taking that word back because like I don't know, I would just love to see our country shift from the patriarchy to the matriarchy because like how much of a difference could we make when women are like not overpowering men, but like in equal positions of power, making these decisions, deciding not to defund rape education programs, right? And uplifting these programs that actually educate our girls and our boys and everyone in between how to use their voice and, no means no.
Yeah, I can't even imagine, Courtney, and it feels so much farther away now than it did 4 years ago.
I know.
My new favorite bitch word is ambitious. So I always
Ooh.
say I'm ambitious.
Oh,
I
yeah.
love that.
Oh, that's great. Jennifer's going to put that on a t-shirt for me now.
Yeah, you know what? That's a good idea. I
I'll put
like
it on a mug. You put it on a t-shirt.
Yeah. But back to this, like the conversation around sex education, I've seen some sex educators go as far to say a lack of sex education is creating trauma, or a lack of sex education is a form of abuse or neglect because we are setting most of the time girls up to fail. But again, I have so many male survivors that I work with, and I can promise many of them don't know how to use their voice either.
Mhm.
So the need for sex education is critical. We're not even close in this country. We are not even close.
I know. And like you said, it does feel like we're further away, than we were 4 years ago. Especially living in a county where we're an abstinence only county. And so our the children that go to public school in this county are not being taught anything. And if anything, the ones that are going to church, the churches around here are being taught that you can't touch yourself and self-pleasure is a sin. And so that that leads to other issues. But since I brought it up, let's talk about masturbation.
Let's do it. Let's do it. It gets so complicated, especially within that construct, because of course there's hormones. I have so many clients now in their 30s, 40s, 50s who said, I discovered masturbation when I was 4, when I was 6.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully you can hear me okay. The trash truck is
Oh,
out.
no,
Good.
Jennifer and I discovered this like recently that Zoom does not pick up anything but your voice. It's amazing. So
Okay.
yeah.
Sorry, you're gonna have to edit that.
No, we don't edit anything on this podcast.
Yeah. So okay. So I'm back.
It's okay.
So those feelings, the hormone, the pure physiology of pleasure, the clitoris is the only organ of either sex that is designed purely for pleasure. That is why it's there.
Mhm.
It has more than 2 times as many nerve endings as the head of the cock. So this thing is wired for pleasure. And when a little girl discovers, oh my gosh, when I hump my stuffed animal or when I hump my blanket like this, it feels
Mhm.
really good.
Or
And
when I
then,
use the hairbrush.
or the hairbrush,
Yeah.
whatever. All right. Thanks for that bit of information for me. All right.
Not speaking from personal
All
experience.
right. Mhm. But then
Right.
she tells her mom and her mom shames her. And then she goes to church and church shames her. And then she just walks around thinking she's the most disgusting person. And I use that word purposefully because it's the one I hear the most in regard to masturbation. And again, I'm talking to 20, 30, 40, 50-year-olds who are still think I am disgusting
Yeah.
because I can't control this need to self-pleasure.
Yeah. I think being a biology teacher sort of like kind of helped me wrap my head around it. But like I'm right there in the same camp as the women that you're just, or I was right there in the same camp as the women that you're describing. But like, you know, as like a science-minded person, like I feel like I've always thought like, how is it any different from like scratching an itch on your arm? Like it's not, it's just like you said, it's purely physiological. And I mean, aren't there like tons of health benefits that go along with it?
Absolutely. Yes. Oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, improved mood, better sleep. Um, Not for the little ones, but for people our age, women our age, improved health of the pelvic floor, less incontinence, stronger orgasms. The list goes on and on.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, that's just such an important thing to talk about because like we said, it's so stigmatized. But like going back to like, you know, the little ones too, like it's not like something that, and Jennifer, didn't we talk about this recently on some podcast where we're like, we don't like encourage you to do it in public, but like it's really important to have these conversations when your 3-year old is, you know, humping her stuffed animal. But it's so hard to do it without making them feel like ashamed. So, like, do you have any advice for moms of like little ones that, you know, so that they don't accidentally traumatize their kid?
Yes, yes. So my favorite go-to here is really talking about the difference between privacy and secrecy. And the littlest ones are not going to know. So they're going to hump the stuffed animal right in the living room, but you can still this is a tough one. If they're humping the stuffed animal in the living room in front of the whole family, then you probably would want to stop them because you wouldn't want them to later be embarrassed or shamed. But
Mm-hmm.
if they're kind of off on their own, maybe you talk to them about it later. So you're just in a private place and you just say what you were doing was completely normal.
Mm-hmm.
If you're bold enough, you can say, I did that when I was little, but I
Mm-hmm.
had to learn the difference between what we do in private. You never need to make this a secret. You didn't do anything wrong. You don't even need to be embarrassed about it, but that's just something we do in private.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I kind of, you know, added to that and I said, you know, the bathroom, the shower, your bedroom, those are perfectly totally okay places to do that and you can close the door and feel perfectly safe doing that.
I
So,
love that. I love that. Um, yeah, I haven't gotten there. My boys are 9 and 11. I have not seen any evidence yet, but I think it's coming. But just even,
mhm.
waking up with erections, and it
Yeah,
was super distressful for my littlest one when he was young. So you have to have those conversations.
yeah, for sure. Um, that book, do you still have that book, that picture book
I
that I loaned you?
Oh,
Did
it's
they,
right here.
isn't it awesome? Like the colors and the illustrations. I mean, I just, as a science artist, it's like my favorite book.
It's
That's
beautiful. And
a
I'll
lot
read the
about
title
me.
just in case there's those of you listening, not
That's
watching us.
great.
Says we need to talk about vaginas, an important book about vulvas, periods, puberty, and sex by Allison Rodgers and Anka Lalarge.
And I picked that book up in a cute little town called Madison in Connecticut at a bookstore called RJ Julia's. And I'm adding that little tidbit because I don't know a bookstore within a 200-mile radius around here where I could find that book.
That's a good point.
I
That's a
mean,
Yeah.
good.
maybe Barnes and Noble might have it like in the back. I don't know, but
Or
I,
online type thing.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
like you can buy it online, obviously, but like it was on display in the children's section of this bookstore, and I thought that was great. Like it wasn't in like the little kid section. It was in like the,
Right.
you know, by the graphic novels, like where where it needed to be. But does that book mention masturbation?
it does. It absolutely does. And I love that. Yep. And just so it's called Touching Yourself. Your body is amazing. It talks about the embarrassment of periods. It talks about the self-cleaning vagina, when to see the doctor, what your first period is going to feel like. Like
Oh
it's
my
just
gosh.
fantastic.
Let's talk about the self-cleaning vagina because I was in the car yesterday and my son was annoying my oldest and my oldest, you know, she was annoyed and she was like, quit being a douchebag.
Oh,
I was like, what did you just call him? She was like, a douchebag. I was like, do you know what that is? And she was like, no. So I told her, and she just cracked up and she thought it was the funniest thing. And so then we had a conversation about the dangers of douching. And then, as if my phone is listening to me, I got this like Instagram targeted, I don't know if it was a targeted ad or if it was just a coincidence, but it was about how the company Lysol in the like early 1900s sold uh like disinfectant products as a douche, and women were shamed into using it. And actually, hundreds of women died as a result of using Lysol's douche product. And Lysol never took accountability or ownership, of course, and they just kind of acted like it never happened. And I never knew that. So,
Oh, that's great. I've never heard of that before.
I mean, I
Mm-mm.
literally just saw the Instagram post last night and had the douche conversation yesterday. So it was like a really random coincidence. But yeah,
Yeah, probably not a coincidence. I just learned, I'm constantly learning, which is so much fun.
I,
I was just talking to a gynecologist a couple months ago, and she was saying really we should only wash our vulvas with water because for some women, just the soap, it doesn't even matter what you're using, is just too much. It will upset the pH balance. They're left with chronic um, bacterial infections, UTIs, bladder infections. So she's like, all your vulva needs is water.
yeah,
For some of us, if you like to use soap and it doesn't cause any irritation, it's fine. But vaginas smell like vaginas. They're supposed to.
right. Yeah, they're not supposed to smell like lemons.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. Um, but yeah, I think just the fact that that's a chapter in that book is amazing. Jennifer, were you going to say something?
Well, no, I was gonna say that's important to talk about because I feel like we get shamed a lot for just what we naturally are.
Mm,
And even now I see like so many products out there that help with your vagina and how it smells and this and that and take these supplements and like it's bombarded on
mm,
my feed. And I'm like, is my feed trying to tell me something? I started to, and I was like,
right?
why would my feed know something about me like that? I don't know. But it starts, and I'm 45 and I was like, what is going on here?
Right. You've gone 45 years without putting lotion down there.
Right.
Like, you don't need to start. Like, what's that product called? Loom. I've been like their ads are super like they kind of trick me into thinking that it's like a really inclusive, like awesome product. And it might be, but I'm like, I think we need you, Loom. Like
Right.
their commercials are literally telling you to like rub this like deodorant cream down there so that you don't smell. I'm like, I, if you're like an active person and you live in Florida like we do and it's 100 degrees and you've been outside all day and you're sweating and you get home, sure, you're gonna smell like perspiration, but just
Right.
in the shower and just
Right.
a cold shower, you know. Um,
Right.
but
I
that's to exclude the people that actually do have like biological, cases where I don't know, they're making the wrong amino acids or their body isn't breaking down the right amino acids, and that results in like like an odor that most people don't have. That's a completely different case. We're just talking about like normal or not normal, but typical bodies.
Yeah, but I want to show you guys this page. Can you see it where they show the difference in the viscosity of vaginal discharge? I mean, they
Yes, I
go.
can see the top one is like thicker and the bottom one is like thinner or something.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So it talks about how it gets thicker when you're ovulating because it needs to trap the sperm. Like it goes for it. And what's normal, what's not, how the smells can change. And if it changes too much, that's not normal. And you would, yeah, need to see the
Mhm.
doctor. So
That's amazing because I
yeah.
know when I growing up, like, that was very hush hush in our house and
Mhm.
not something that was talked about. And so you just kind of navigated on your own. And, now thanks to Google and things like that, if I ever wonder anything, I Google it. But back then, when I was,
You just thought something was wrong with you.
I was just like, oh, should I mention this? But I can't because I'm not comfortable with my mom to talk about things like this. You
Mhm.
know, we didn't use correct terms. It was, your privates
Your
and
peak.
yeah, and it was just always like, don't let anybody touch you there. But I've heard that using terms like that exposes you or leaves you vulnerable to be assaulted by grown men or
Mhm.
grown-ups, because it's not always men, but mostly men.
Right.
Um, and so I always fear that when these laws are being put in place that are restricting access to books, and making the discussion of sex taboo, that they are thinking they're protecting kids, but in reality, they are putting them at more of a risk to
Mhm.
be victims.
Yeah. Isn't that because it's like, if you don't know that like you are a vagina owner and your vagina is your property and no one should touch it, right? Then you you do become more susceptible to abuse because uh you don't know what's happening to you in that moment. Holly, I think you can speak better on this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's a little bit about what we talked about earlier. It's having the right terminology is so important. So when your kids go to school, they know like no one is supposed to touch me on my penis or on my butt or on my vulva, not down there, not in your privates. Like that's so ambiguous for little ones. They're like, what the hell is down there? And what
Yeah.
is my privates? So using those terms are important, and it's important medically. So let's say that there is something wrong with the vulva or with the penis or with the scrotum. Like our kids need to be able to say something hurts here so that
Right.
we can address it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
It's a really important part for sure.
And then the not using the words translates, and this is very much my trauma lens, but I think if kids knew, oh, there's fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, right?
Mhm.
There's 4 different ways that I'm going to react to any situation that feels anxiety provoking or traumatic in any way. That would be so helpful because most of the time with sexual trauma, it's going to be freeze or fawn.
Okay.
So freeze is exactly what it sounds like. Our body just gets immobilized. Like think of like the deer being chased in the woods. She's at some point probably going to just go sticks like really still and
Hmm.
try to hide. And
Hmm.
part of that is a physiological adaptation. The fawn is, I know it sounds like the deer, but it's like a translation on that. The fawn is playing nice. The
Hmm.
fawn is putting a smile on your face. The fawn is go along to get along so I don't get hurt any worse.
I had no idea that that's what that I've
Yeah,
heard of fight, flight, and then in freeze I recently learned, but fawn I've always heard, but I never knew. So,
yeah,
and I'm,
First time I've heard that.
what?
yeah.
That's the first time I've heard that term. Like in
Really?
this, yeah, I never heard of that before. That's interesting.
And if I don't know what's the statistic, like 1 in 3 women have been in a fawn situation before, and we didn't even know it, but when you describe it I can think of a few situations where I have been in that situation, and maybe had I known what fawn was before that I would have been able to get myself out of that situation a little bit faster, or I don't know. I don't want to make it sound like you can prevent something from happening to you, because there are certainly cases where you can't. But I don't know. Is that
Yeah.
insensitive to say?
No, no, not at all. Again, it comes back to using our voice, and all of us have this really incredible limbic system, this instinctual system that kicks in and says, what am I going to do to survive here? And
Right.
if it's you, Courtney, in a situation with a person who is much bigger than you, who wants to have sex with you, you're like, oh shit, I can't fight this person. I can't run away. Freezing, I'm not in that state. So guess what? I'm going to be nice and go along so this ends quickly and I can get myself out of this apartment and go home. But
Wow.
then what happens to you, Courtney, is you get home and you're like, oh my God, I didn't say no. So I must have wanted it. I'm a gross person. I had that coming. Why did I have that extra drink? Like that whole thing kicks
Right.
off. And then we've got a woman with an immense amount of shame and low self-worth. And then that story just perpetuates.
That makes so much sense.
And these are we should have a Dr. Holly in every middle school. We should have a class. And I remember, in this district at the middle school that my children are zoned for, I had a health class and I really liked my health teacher. She didn't know as much as Dr. Holly knows, but she, she taught us about like STIs and all that stuff. And it was a lot more than they get today. They get literally nothing today. And And as a biology teacher, fast forward a few years, health class was just fully removed from the curriculum, and now it's just biology. It kind of falls on me, the biology teacher, but I'm not legally allowed to talk about these things, right? But I guess, the way that I was a teacher, students asked me these questions, right? And so I did my best to answer them. And that there's no scenario where I was like, I can't answer that. I always was like, I will answer that, but you should know that I'm not supposed to be talking about this. So please don't go and get me in trouble, but I will answer all of your questions, right? And I don't know. I think what I'm saying is we just need to have a class.
And I so appreciate teachers like you who stick their neck out to give these kids the information they need, that they're
I would be fired today if I was a teacher.
Oh yeah, you would be. That's probably good that you chose another route.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, I have another book I want to show. It's called This Is So Awkward. Oh wait, is my video on
I
reverse?
can see it.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. So it's called This Is So Awkward by Kara Natterson, MD, and Vanessa Kroll Bennett. Modern Puberty Explained. This is kind of like for the older teen, I guess, high school, or like the parent that's like, wants to have, scientific conversations about it or whatever. And this book and the book that Holly mentioned earlier are the only two books that I could find that were worth buying for sexual education. And I did a pretty deep dive, but in terms of like meeting both of those age groups, those were the best two books. So we'll put those in our show notes. If you're interested, you can go out and buy those or rent them from your public library, so that you can have these hard conversations with your kids. Because ultimately the goal is to, like we said at the top of this episode, promote sex positive lives. And as a young person, that starts with masturbation. That starts with knowing why your vaginal fluid is thicker at certain times of the month than others. And it starts with knowing the proper names of things and what happens when you're in these awkward, or not awkward, but anxiety, like you said, anxiety inducing situations.
Yeah. And Courtney and Jennifer, the simplest definition of sex positivity that I say all the time is all sex is good sex as long as it's consensual and pleasurable. So we literally have two boxes to check. Is this consensual? Does it feel good? So perverted, weird, not normal, disgusting, slutty, none of those words come into it. Check two boxes. Is this consensual? Is it pleasurable? And of course, most of the time, masturbation is going to be consensual. The only reason I say most of the time is because truly for some people, it can become compulsive and they don't feel like they can kind of give consent to themselves, but that's usually way farther down the road. I mean, I guess there's definitely some teens or young men that would feel like there was some compulsivity around porn and masturbation.
Yeah, I was just going to say porn probably has something to do with that, which
right.
We're not anti-porn, but we know that there's, it definitely does change male, or not just male, but a lot of the times male expectations and female body images, but also male body images too, in terms of size and things. But
and stamina. Yeah. So young guys that watch porn think they're literally supposed to last 30 minutes to an hour. And the duration for most penis and vagina sexual experiences is 7 minutes.
See, that's not like, I have had conversations with women where they have thought the complete opposite. And I'm just kind of sitting there quietly, like, I'm not sure, if, 20 straight minutes is, and it's like, they think like it's supposed to last that long. And I don't know. I'm glad you said that.
A sexual experience from start to finish, the average is 20 minutes, but the penis and vagina part is 7.
That's what I'm talking. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but I agree. I think a lot of people have the idea that it's the penis vagina 30 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm always like, I don't want that.
No, thank you.
No. But men, I think especially feel like they have a need to go that long. And so sometimes it's like, no, really, I'm good. You're okay.
Yeah. And that's where like communicating in that situation is more like, you can come now, like how a lot of women can't say that, And I mean, that's just a whole nother conversation that we need 45 additional minutes to discuss.
Right.
Yeah. So the problem with the whole cis straight sex is women need about 20 minutes to reach full arousal.
Mhm.
So, right, so we're the slow cookers, men the microwave ovens. They can get that spontaneous desire pretty quickly. We need 20 minutes, but by the time we get there, he's done. So then we're left in the orgasm gap,
Mhm.
right? So many straight women are having fewer orgasms than men because of that differential. So really what we need to do is talk more about the orgasm gap, which by the way, queer and gay couples don't have
Ah.
barely any orgasm gap there. It's just straight couples because of the difference between men and women's arousal.
Mhm.
So she needs to come first, right? So
Right.
there's a lot of foreplay.
Play. Mhm.
He's giving oral, he's using her toy on her, he's using fingers,
Mhm.
whatever she needs. And then it gets to be his turn because she really does need that time to warm up to reach full arousal.
And that is directly connected to sexism in our society, and that in this like idea that like women should be quiet and agreeable and not say, hey, what about me, right? And it just kind of goes hand in hand with like gender equality and how we should be able to experience the same pleasures, but also the same luxuries such as paid parental leave and so on. And I can't get into it now, but it really just relates to gender equality, I think.
It does. So I just wanted to quickly jump back to when we were talking about porn, because again, I'm not anti-porn at all, but I'm definitely pro knowing the difference between entertainment and education. Most porn is entertainment, fine, great, good. But when young people are using it as education and what sex is supposed to look like, that's not so great.
Mm-hmm.
But there are several really good ethical porn sites. And typically, this is porn made by women for women. So there's a little bit more of a storyline, but there's all kinds of options on these websites. It does mean that you have to pay something, a small fee a year, whether it's 20 bucks, 25 bucks, but
Mm-hmm.
essentially the performers are getting paid for these services versus what's happening on YouPorn, Pornhub, which again, those are safe porn sites, and most of them are vetted, but we can never be absolutely sure. So
Mm-hmm.
if you would be willing to pay a small fee for the year to buy into an ethical porn site, that
Mm-hmm.
would be my recommendation.
So let's make this conversation a little bit harder. What what do we do when our kids are at that age and they're sort of sneaking it behind our backs? Do we pay for a subscription and say, here, and have that conversation? Like my gut instinct is to say yes, but wow, I feel like no parents ever would ever do that.
I know, Courtney, that's such a good question and one I haven't even really thought about. I've certainly thought about the porn conversation and talking about the difference between education and entertainment and things that we don't want to be watching. I probably would, but the age of that, I mean, you guys do so many of these wonderful talks. We can never say, oh, 13 is perfect because Jennifer, your daughter, and Courtney's daughter at 13 could be two very different humans.
Mm-hmm.
So this takes so much parental attunement to
Mm-hmm.
figure out like what your child would be ready for.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as pro porn as I am, my preference would be that our kids learn how to masturbate using their imagination.
That is a great answer. I love that. Yeah. I think that's so important. And because I think didn't we have a conversation about this when we were talking about sex toys and how because that's what we talk about.
Right.
And how like uh some people like need the sex toys and other people like they can take them or leave them sort of
Yeah.
thing. So it's like I mean, I guess it's not the end of the world if like you have to use a sex toy every time, but I guess there is something to say that like, oh, I can do this without the sex toy, or I can make this last longer by using my imagination, or I don't know.
Yeah, no, Courtney, those are all good questions. So Erotic flexibility is always what I'm trying to help my clients attain. And erotic flexibility means I can use my imagination. I can just be mindful in my sexuality and literally try to keep my mind kind of blank and focus on what it feels like to have my hand on my vulva. Sometimes I can use porn. I can listen to erotica. I can read erotica. I can just look at a picture of my partner and masturbate to that. If you can do all of those things, you are an erotically flexible human being.
It sounds impossible.
No, I definitely have clients that can do it. For some of us, we can't.
Impressive.
Right, we can't, and we need sex toys. And that can be, I'm just going to point out two things. All vulvas and clitorises are shaped differently. Some clitorises are much more hooded than others. So for a very hooded clitoris, it's going to be hard to get that woman off just with a hand. They are probably going to need more stimulation. And then I also want to say, as women age and men age, the sensitivity of the genitals decreases. So what worked for a woman when she was 25 may not work for her when she's 45 with her hand. And so I would want her to use a sex toy because who gives a shit? I don't care how anybody have an orgasm, however you want to get there. So just to kind of normalize all of those ways.
I mean, I love that I learned so many new things this episode, including that there are names for things that I had no idea, like erotic flexibility. Like that's a thing.
Right.
I mean, it makes sense now, but like, an hour ago, I wouldn't have guessed that that was a thing, so education is power for sure.
Oh my gosh, I'm just so glad we could have this conversation. And I know there's many more conversations to have. So anytime you guys want me back, just ask.
You were amazing. Like I loved listening to you. It was so helpful and like informative. I really appreciate you being on.
Oh, of course. Thank you, Jennifer. And I love what you all do with books. More people need to find this podcast. So if you are listening through my platform, these two ladies talk to an incredibly smart, intelligent degree about banned books and books we're not reading and why you need to read different books. So if you are a book person, please subscribe to this podcast.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to more conversations about all the things sex in the future. And I guess, don't ban books.
Ban bigots.
That's what we say at the end of each episode.
Love it. Thanks, you guys.
This episode has been engineered and mixed by your hosts, Jennifer and Courtney.
You can listen to the Milf for Books podcast on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, or literally any podcast app you want.
If you want to watch a podcast, check out our Milf for Books YouTube page. That's MILF, 4, Books. And don't forget to like and subscribe.
Follow the show on Instagram, Threads, Facebook, and Blue Sky at MILF for Books. Again, that's MILF, 4, Books. But follow us on TikTok at Moms Until Literary Freedom.
Thanks for listening.